Hey guys, it's Madison and welcome to this video in which I'm going to break down the language learning progress and activities that I managed to do over the course of 2023. That includes a breakdown of the hours that I spent on each language, the activities I did, as well as a review of the goals that I set at the beginning of 2023 and kind of a review of how well I managed to accomplish / not accomplish all of those goals. I really nerded out in the process of preparing for this video, making a bunch of different graphs and statistics and stuff, looking at the different things I did throughout this year. So yeah, we have a lot of data to go through. Hopefully I can go through it all in a very succinct and concise manner rather than rambling on forever and ever. As always, there will be timestamps below, so if you are only interested in certain parts, you can always skip to those specific parts. But let's go ahead and jump in with the first little section here, which is actually a Q4 breakdown. I've done breakdowns of Q1, 2, and 3. And since the end of the year also brings around the end of Q4, I'm going to go ahead and do a really brief review of Q4 before jumping into the actual look back on the entire year as a whole. So first of all, let's go through the quarter month by month, starting with October. All right, so looking at a graph of all the total time I spent on languages throughout October, you can see it's very clearly very heavily Korean focused. Most of that Korean was reading either novels or webtoons. Also, I was still taking my Korean class twice a week at this time, so that was also a lot of Korean stuff. I was preparing for the speech contest at the beginning of November, so I had to write and practice and all that stuff for the speech contest. Also, at the end of the month, I did a little Spooktober kind of fun challenge thing where I tried to do kind of spooky or Halloween-y kind of themed activities. All of those things have their own videos that I'll link below in the description if you're interested in seeing more about them. But yeah, that is basically it for October. I did do a little bit of Mandarin and Japanese throughout the month, a little bit at the beginning and again at the end during that little Spooktober challenge, but mostly, as you can see, basically all just Korean. Out of the 61 hours and 39 total minutes of language learning time, 56 hours and 40 minutes of that were active time. So as you can see, very, very passive stuff done. It's because I was trying to avoid dramas and shows during the semester that I was teaching because I tend to kind of get sucked in and watch way too many. So I was trying to avoid that and do just active stuff. And because of that, basically almost all of my overall time is just active time. But I'll show that graph anyway, just in case you're curious. And as you might have guessed from the way that chart looks, the language breakdown is basically over 90% Korean, followed by Mandarin and then Japanese for both the overall as well as the active totals. Moving on to November, again, even more heavily focused on Korean, just barely squeaked in a little tiny bit of Mandarin and Japanese, only one day of each of those. But yeah, other than that, as you can see, it's basically all Korean every day. In fact, as you can see, I did Korean literally every single day this month. I wasn't even really trying to do like every single day Korean necessarily. It just kind of turned out that way, which is very nice. I was reading webtoons almost daily at that point, which is a big reason why I managed to study Korean every single day, even if it was just a little bit before bed. Also, at the very beginning of the month, I did have that speech contest, so I had to give that speech and practice. And then in the middle of the month, I had the topic exam. And so leading up to that, I had a really, really, really mind-numbingly intensive Korean challenge that I did, which is responsible for a lot of the high numbers in the middle of this chart. I made a whole video about that experience and how exhausting and how much I managed to learn over that time, so you can check that out if you want to. Once again, I'll put that video in the cards in the description if you want to check it out. And funnily enough, the 24th, which is that really, really high spike of the month, is the day that I filmed that realistic study vlog, which I had every intent of just making a really normal day, but it actually ended up being really, really high, like obviously like the highest day of the month. And that's because I binge watched a Korean drama and then I also met up with my friends from my Korean class, which ended up being 5 hours straight of speaking, which is not a normal daily routine for me, but the overall vibe of that vlog was still very realistic, where I was, being very lazy in the morning, just kind of doing what I felt like, binge watched a drama, all very, very normal, realistic occurrences for me. So even though that day sticks out as an not normal day on this graph, I still think the overall vibes of the day were still very realistic, my typical routine, even though the numbers actually ended up being quite high because of that 5 hours of speaking, which is very atypical for me, especially coupled with that, binge watching of a show. But yeah, once again, just like the previous month, if you look at the overall hours for the month, 86 hours and 40 minutes, and you compare that to the active hours, which is 82 hours, again, not much of a difference there, which means that basically almost all of that was just active study, except for that one drama that I mentioned that I binge watched. All of it was active study, which is insane, honestly. That's a lot of time to be actively studying. And again, a big chunk of that, I think over half of it was the topic prep. So yeah, a very, very intensive mind-numbing month, especially in the middle there, but yeah, really good for my Korean language learning for sure. And yeah, because the overall and active time was so close, the pie charts look exactly the same for the language breakdown, basically entirely Korean for the entire month. So yeah, a very Korean heavy month. once again. And then moving on to December, the final month of the year, and this is where things finally look a bit different. Mandarin is once again making a strong showing with those tall spikes, which means binge watching dramas. Yes, this is when my semester ended basically, and I allowed myself to get back to watching dramas, aka binge watching some dramas as well. I was actually really proud of the fact that I managed to kind of abstain from dramas for the most part throughout the semester. I did watch a few here or there, but that really helped me to not have as terrible of a sleep schedule as I can get when I get tempted into binge watching a drama. And so yeah, that is why Mandarin makes a strong resurgence in this month. You can also see that Korean definitely kind of was not nearly as strong as the previous 2 months in this chart. I did have a few Korean classes at the beginning of the month, and then I also did a bit of Korean reading. You can see kind of in the middle there where I had my like last hurrah challenge before I left Korea, where I kind of studied all my languages every single day for like 4 days in a row. And as I said in that video, as well as my kind of language learning while flying video, I didn't anticipate that I would be doing much active studying after I got home. And as you can see, if you look at my active studying chart, that's basically what happened. I did absolutely nothing except for the 16th, the day after my flight actually. After that one little day of doing a little bit of Chinese, I did nothing else. The entire month, at least actively, I did watch a few dramas, as you saw earlier, but yeah, I actually have not studied anything since then. Even still, it's like the middle of the first week of January, and yeah, nothing since the 16th. I probably should get back into it now, but I've just been enjoying being home, hanging out with the dog and family and stuff, and so I've just been relaxing, enjoying my time, and in the past few weeks, not even watching any dramas either, so just having a little break from language learning, and probably should get back into it relatively soon. But yeah, even though I haven't done much in the past couple of weeks in the end of December, because of that resurgence of binge watching dramas, my numbers are still higher than the previous months, with a total time of 96 hours and 16 minutes, and the majority of that, of course, is Mandarin, because I was watching a bunch of Mandarin shows. Korean still makes a decent appearance because of the classes I was finishing up, the day I spent with a friend learning calligraphy, that kind of stuff. And then Japanese is distantly in third place. I did a little bit during that one little last hurrah challenge, but other than that, not really anything the entire month. But of course, if you look at the active time, it is quite different because, again, most of that Mandarin time was just shows, and so Korean, once again, is definitely far in the lead for active time spent during this month. All right, so that wraps up my kind of month-by-month breakdown. If you look at the overall quarter as a whole, it looks very similar to the month-by-month, where the Korean is very strong throughout the beginning, and then finally at the end of the semester, the dramas came back and started to have little high spikes again. If you remove those dramas and look just at the active time, it is even more strongly Korean focused, and I'm really happy with that, honestly, because my primary goal for this quarter was to really focus on improving my Korean. I'd focused a lot on my other languages in other quarters, although I had done, some Korean here and there as well. And I was just really happy that I managed to do so much Korean, especially reading throughout those 3 months. And so yeah, I'm very happy with how that quarter ended up going. If you look at the overall total number of hours spent on languages during quarter 4, it's 244 hours and 35 minutes, which I think is second place out of all the quarters of the year. I'll put all the numbers up on screen so you can see. And as you'd expect, the language breakdown is primarily Korean, although because of that last month of binge watching some dramas, Mandarin makes a surprisingly strong presence in that graph as well. But yeah, Korean is definitely by far the highest number. If you look at active, of course, Korean is by far the highest part of that pie chart, over 90% in fact, and the total active time for quarter 4 was 163 hours and 18 minutes, which is by far the highest amount of active time spent in any quarter on my languages. In fact, I think it's like double almost my previous quarters, and so that is quite impressive to me. I did a lot of stuff in that last quarter, like the speech, the topic, all that stuff, and the class as well, and so it really shows in these active numbers how intensive this quarter was. All right, so that's it for the quarter 4 recap. It took a bit longer than I'd hoped, honestly, but let's go ahead and move on to the yearly recap. It's so funny because back at the end of January, when I first made one of these little recap videos for the month of January, I talked about how many hours I got and how impressed I was and how freakishly high that month was for me and how much I studied and how incredible that was. But as it turns out, January was actually the second lowest month that I spent all year on languages, which is crazy to me. I was so impressed by January and how much I got done, and for that to be the second lowest month, that's insane to me. So let's go ahead and look at a month-by-month breakdown of how many hours I studied. As you can see, August was the highest month by far. Zoe, where are you going? She's trying to climb on the table. What are you doing? As you can see, August is the highest month by far with 138 hours and 54 minutes. That's crazy. I definitely watched a ton of dramas that month because, wow, that's insane. And the lowest month was way lower, literally over 100 hours lower How crazy is that with just a mere 35 hours and 7 minutes in March? The rest of the month span mostly from the 60s to 80s roughly, although there's a few that are a little bit higher or lower. Zoe, where are you trying to go? What are you doing? You're blocking my video, girl. You can't stay there. All right, let's go here. But anyway, honestly, looking at these numbers, it makes me so proud of what I did manage to accomplish this year. Here's the active monthly totals, and even that lowest month in February is still almost 11 hours. Zoe, you can't sit up there. All right, so the dog's now downstairs, so no more chaos up here. But like I was saying, even the lowest month of active studying in February, even though it looks very small and insignificant compared to some of the other numbers on this list, especially November, the highest month, which is not surprising because of the Korean classes, the topic prep, the speech, all that stuff. But even that 11 hours is insanely high compared to last year's numbers. And honestly, the reason that this year was just so successful and so kind of mind-blowingly unbelievable to me how much I managed to get done. I really think a lot of it comes down to this channel and having to think of videos to shoot and challenges I could do, projects I could work on, vlogs I could shoot, and that kind of thing. And so I was constantly trying to think of new exciting things to do for language learning, which caused me to do a bunch more language learning than I was last year, where I wasn't shooting as much content. But yeah, as far as the most exciting number, I guess you could say, of this entire video, the overall amount of time I spent on languages throughout the year. For Korean, I spent 435 hours and 54 minutes. For Mandarin, 375 hours and 38 minutes. And for Japanese, 117 hours and 47 minutes, for a grand total of 929 hours and 19 minutes. Which, like I said, is just absolutely wild to me, hard to believe. What a high number. It's almost 1,000 hours. That's a lot of hours. To put it into a context that you can more easily understand, perhaps, that's 116 days of spending 8 hours a day working on language. That's insane. Now, to be fair, a huge chunk of that time is passive time, so watching dramas and stuff, but still, that's a lot of time spent either listening to or studying languages. Which, again, looking back to my little January self that was so in awe of the fact that I spent 50 hours in 1 month on languages, that version of me would never have even dared to imagine that I would get to almost 1,000 hours in a year. It's just honestly, like I said, mind-blowing to me. If you break down my language, it's almost 47% Korean, 40-ish% Mandarin, and 13-ish% Japanese, which honestly is surprising to me because of all the binge watching in Mandarin that I tend to do throughout the year. I would have thought that Mandarin would edge out Korean slightly just because of all that drama watching time that I spent. So I'm actually kind of surprised that Korean ended up the overall winner, I guess you could say, of the hours for the year. But I'm not surprised, of course, that Japanese is in the far third just because, like I said, I tend to watch a lot less content in Japanese than the other two. And so therefore the other two's numbers tend to get a lot more inflated because of that passive drama watching or show watching time. And if you look at this crazy, insane chart of the entire year of all the time I spent on my languages, it's such a cool visualization of how I spent my time throughout the year, where I was watching a lot of shows and there's those really high spikes of binge watching versus where I was just doing a lot of active studying in a certain area. This is so fun to kind of like look at this and be like, wow, that's my year. That's my language learning. That's so cool. Turning to the grand totals for just active studying. For Korean, it's 248 hours and 10 minutes. For Mandarin, 41 hours and 5 minutes. And for Japanese, 92 hours and 50 minutes, for a grand total of 382 hours and 5 minutes, which once again is a lot of hours. It's over a third, I think, of my overall total. Looking at the language breakdown, of course, Korean is in the lead with 65% of those hours. Japanese in second place because of that big time focusing on Saturday Reader and reading in Japanese every single day throughout the middle of the year. And that means that Chinese falls in third place with just a mere 11% of my overall active study time. Once again, looking at the big crazy chart showing the entire year spent on active learning. I think I like this one even more than the overall time because it's just so clear looking at this graph, like what I was focusing on throughout the year. You can see that almost 5 months of focusing on Japanese there in the middle. You can see my shift to Korean focus at the end of the year. You can also really clearly see the challenges that I did throughout the year, like the 5-day challenge at the end of January, beginning of February, the 40-hour 7-day language challenge at the beginning of May, the media challenge I did in June, the random number generator challenge I did in August. It's just so cool to like look at the entire year of active study and like see those little challenges pop out from that data. The last challenge I did somewhere in September or October, and it was the screen time challenge. I can't even like really find that exactly because my numbers were just so high and consistent in Korean at that time that it doesn't even really stand out, which is actually kind of crazy. But yeah, like I said, I'm just so glad that I tracked my time this past year because it's so cool to like look back and have a visual representation of my ups and downs and motivation and where I was drawn to one language versus another, and just seeing all of that active effort put into one cool looking chart. I just love this kind of thing. So yeah, that is my basic kind of look back on the year. Moving on to talking about my goals and what goals I had set at the beginning of the year and what I managed to achieve. Starting with Mandarin, my overall goal for Mandarin was to study Mandarin consistently a few days every single month. I'm gonna count that one as a win. I'll go ahead and put on the screen the total number of days that I spent each month on Mandarin. There was 1 month where I did only 1 day of Mandarin and 2 other months where I only did 2 days of Mandarin, but other than that, it was all 3+ days, including some pretty consistent months at the beginning of the year, so I'm pretty happy with how that turned out, even though I didn't technically get a few days every single month. It's good enough for me to count it as achieved. Looking back at my language learning goals video, apparently I also had the goal just to continue watching shows in Mandarin. I'm not sure where I even felt the need to say that as a goal because I of course did that. I always do that. So check, easy achievement of that goal. Moving on to Japanese. Once again, I had the same exact goal of studying every single month for a few days. Once again, I'm going to put all those numbers on the screen. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and say that I achieved that goal. There was again 1 month where I only did 1 day, but other than that, it was all 3+ days, including that really crazy 5-month period or almost 5-month period of time where I did basically every single day Japanese. So I'm really, really, really happy with how that went. I did not plan for that challenge to happen at the beginning of the year, so I never would have imagined that I would have spent nearly as many days on Japanese that I did. So very happy with that. My next goal, I don't even recall setting this goal, but apparently I had the goal to go through all of the Irodori textbooks online. Definitely did not achieve that. I made a video like way back in April, I think, where I did a bit of those textbooks. And that's the video where I decided to stop using those and just switch to Saturday Reader. You can watch that here or in the description if you're interested in why I felt that Saturday Reader was a better fit for me versus the Irodori textbooks. But yeah, definitely did not achieve that goal. My final goal on this list was to improve my Japanese reading abilities, which I definitely did. Again, like I said, that really intensive, almost 5-month challenge of reading every single day. I would say that definitely, obviously, I improved my reading abilities throughout that crazy intensive challenge. So 2 out of 3 goals achieved for Japanese, and the third one I don't even care about anymore, so I'm gonna go ahead and say that I totally was successful in Japanese. The goal that I weirdly enough didn't set was to find content and watch like shows in Japanese. I mentioned in that goal setting video that I just have trouble finding stuff, and so I wasn't even going to set goals for that because I didn't really have hope that I would find things. So I was very pessimistic about that in this video, but honestly, I did watch more than I had thought I would this year. I finished a couple of different shows. I didn't watch a ton, obviously, but I did watch more than I thought I would. So even that non-goal that I didn't set, I would say that I achieved decently last year, although nowhere even near the realm of how much content I watch in Korean or Mandarin. Moving on to my Korean goals, the first goal was to read more. I had set kind of a loose goal of a book per month. Definitely did not achieve that. I'll have to go back and actually count how many books I did manage to read throughout the year, but definitely was not a book per month or even anywhere close. However, not mentioned in this goal was webtoons, because I hadn't really been reading webtoons at the time or even thought that they existed at the time. I mean, I knew they existed, but I hadn't thought about them in years. But I read a ton of webtoons in the last like quarter-ish of the year, and I actually managed to spend more time reading webtoons than I did novels, like significantly more, almost twice as much time spent reading webtoons than novels. And so I'd say that even though I didn't hit that goal of a novel per month, I definitely still did read quite a bit more this last year than I did the previous year. So I'm gonna give that one a shaky. I kind of achieved it. Definitely didn't achieve the loose goal, but I did read much more. The next goal was writing, practice writing more often. I don't really think I achieved this. I honestly don't know what I did the previous year. I'm not sure I wrote anything much at all. I'll go ahead and put like a bar chart of all of the writing stuff I did throughout the entire year, and you'll see that it's not much at all. Like I did do it a few times, very few throughout the year. I'm gonna go ahead and say that I don't think I really wrote as much as I hoped I would this past year. However, a few of these little chunks of writing are actually like bigger writing things, like where I was writing either my speech for the speech contest or writing like little mini essays almost for my Korean class. So some of them were actually like significant chunks of text that I actually got like corrections on. So I am happy that I did do those things, even though I didn't do nearly as much as I had hoped I would this year. So I'm just gonna say that efforts were made, some good things happened, but I don't think that I did as much writing as I had hoped, so a failed goal. Some more kind of more general Korean goals, not linked to a specific like skill. First one, take a Korean class. Check, I took a Korean class in the fall, as I've mentioned already. Next goal, take the topic again. I did once again do that, as I've mentioned. Next one, watch more Korean news. Yes, I did do this. I didn't watch as much as I had hoped, I think, but I did do like a whole media focus challenge where I was focusing heavily on news. I'll go ahead once again put a chart of all the news I did throughout the year. Even when I was setting this goal in the video, I mentioned just here or there I wanted to do some news so that I was getting a little bit more of that advanced vocabulary. I definitely could have done more. As you can see, there's like kind of sporadic bunches where I was focused on the news, but I'm still pretty happy that I managed to do as much as I did, even though it's not a ton throughout the year. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that I achieved that goal, even though it is kind of a weak success. The next goal was to travel more in Korea, hopefully once a month. What was I thinking? What? I think I even mentioned that I could like solo travel. I'm not that kind of person. I don't like solo traveling. I did not travel much at all. I went to Daegu twice. Yeah, that's basically it for the entire year. So definitely a fail there. Next year, my friend is actually coming to Korea. We're planning on going hopefully 1 or 2 places in Korea as well as Japan. So next year I should have better luck, but yeah, I don't know what I was thinking saying once a month traveling. That is so not me, ever. But yeah, hopefully next year I can travel a bit more. But even then, once a month is just, that's aiming very high for me. I don't know what I was thinking. Moving on, my next goals were speaking focused. The first one being get out of the house. Again, didn't really do this. I was once again my introverted self. I did manage at the end of the year to have a few good moments. Like I said, I did go to Dago twice, kind of in the first half of the year, and then in the second half, I met a few friends from my class a few times, so that's good. Not nearly what I was thinking though, so definitely a hard fail on that. Make Korean friends. Once again, no, I managed to make basically one friend. She's Taiwanese, but we speak Korean, so that's good. But not anywhere again what I was imagining, so again, hard fail on that. Get more involved. Once again, I didn't really do this the way I was envisioning. I was thinking like tennis lessons and getting involved in that kind of stuff, maybe swing dancing. Nope, none of that. I did do the speech contest, which I guess was getting involved in some sense, but not what I was thinking, like community stuff. So again, hard fail. This is so sad. And finally, express my personality more in Korean. Judging by the fact that this is once again a goal for next year, again, I would say a fail for this. I did do some speaking stuff. I'll go ahead and like put on the screen my speaking throughout the year. This graph shows speaking where I was like actively engaged in conversations with like friends or giving my speech or practicing my speech, that kind of stuff. So as you can see, it's very, very, very sporadic. Now, I will say this chart does not include my Korean classes. I'll go ahead and show that chart where it has the Korean classes added to it as well. So you can see at the end of the year, a lot more speaking time obviously shows up because I was in class for all those days. However, those hour-and-a-half classes were not an hour and a half of me speaking, so it feels weird to just include them as just like regular old speaking time because usually there's like 4 to 5 of us in the class, including the teacher, and she would talk a lot. And so it's like, I don't know, for an hour-and-a-half class, I'd speak maybe 20 minutes, maybe, probably even less than that. So that's why I didn't want to just include it as just plain old speaking time. But also this chart doesn't include like the daily interactions I have, like going to the store, checking out, talking to like store clerks and stuff. I would have a lot more common, like really, really short transactional conversations, but those are kind of boring and difficult to keep track of in like time and stuff. So I didn't ever include that in my like time tracking stuff. So technically I would speak Korean much more often than this, just in very, very small transactional bits that aren't actually things I need to practice or like long conversations. So I feel fine not including it. So I did do more speaking than this, but what I was aiming for was really much more of like long, deep conversations, talking about a variety of topics, getting better at being fluent without like pausing and hesitating, and those little transactions don't work towards that anyway, so I would definitely say that's a fail. I did not speak as much as I was hoping to. I am glad I took that class. That was really good for me. I did speak a bit. And the speech contest was also a good progress towards my speaking goals in general, but as far as the actual official goals that I set, all of them were just big fails. And in conclusion, my kind of more general, not language specific goals, the first one was to study more consistently. I would say that I definitely achieved this. I studied way, way, way more consistently than I even imagined that I possibly would. In fact, I went ahead and added up all the days where I did absolutely nothing in my languages. You can see it here by quarter, and it totals just 85 days out of the year where I didn't do active study. That means that on over 75% of the days of the year, I was actively studying at least one language. That's crazy to me. That's so much. I never would have imagined that I would do that much. When you look at overall, so including like dramas and stuff in that time, it goes down even further. I'll put the numbers again per quarter. It's only 44 days where I don't either actively study or watch some sort of content in my languages, which means that almost 90% of the days of the year, I was doing something language learning related, like I said. So that's just mind-blowing again. I never would have imagined this at the beginning of the year. It's just crazy, honestly, but yeah, I would say definitely achieved that goal. I studied way, way, way more consistently than I ever would have possibly imagined. The next goal, keep track of language learning. As you have seen this entire video, definitely did that. The next goal was make videos more consistently. Like I mentioned already, that was also achieved. While I didn't manage to make a video every single week, I was very happy in the amount that I did manage to put out. And that consistency, once again, I think honestly led to all of this. If I hadn't been so consistent with trying to think of video content, like I said, I think none of this would have happened. So I'm very thankful for this channel and how consistent I managed to be this year, for all of this progress that I managed to make. The last goal on the list was to write an academic journal article, which again, did not do. I did one little tiny research session and then I was like, this is a really cool idea. Then I never actually went anywhere with it, and so I'm pushing that goal on to next year. Hopefully this upcoming year I can go ahead and work on this article much more than that one little sad session this year. So yeah, that was all of the goals that I achieved or failed to achieve for 2023. I'm pretty happy with what I did manage to achieve, even though I didn't manage to do everything like Korean speaking. Really quickly, because I've already rambled on way too long for this video, I'm gonna go ahead and show an activity breakdown for each language. This is my overall activity breakdown for Korean. Of course, show watching like dramas and variety shows is by far the highest category, but reading is not far behind with a combination of novel reading and webtoon reading. So pretty happy with that, honestly. If you remove the show watching just to see the active stuff that I did, you can see kind of a clear picture of all the active stuff that I did throughout the year. Once again, I'm pretty happy with all the things that I managed to achieve this year between the topic stuff, the writing stuff, even though it wasn't as much as I had hoped. Speaking practice, even though again, it wasn't as much as I had hoped. The class is a pretty big chunk, the new stuff I did. So again, very happy with my Korean studies this year. Moving on to Mandarin. Mandarin, I did not do nearly as much active stuff as the other languages I had done. And so show watching by far is the highest category, of course. And if you remove those shows from the pie chart, you can see that Do Chinese is the vast majority of all of the active studying that I do. It is definitely my favorite Mandarin resource so far. So that is why it is so highly represented in this pie chart. And last but not least, Japanese, which is the only language that's not dominated by show watching. Instead, it's dominated by Satterebiru, which is of course obvious because of that big challenge from the middle of the year once again. If you remove that huge chunk of Satterebiru, you can see that most of the rest of the stuff that I did was focused on listening stuff. So once again, I am proud of the fact that I did manage to find some stuff that I liked throughout the year, and I'm hopeful that in the future I can also find more things that I like. So hopefully moving forward, I can still find a few things here and there that I enjoy. And apart from that, there was just some Irodori stuff in the very beginning of the year, as well as some news reading from either the Manabi Reader app or Easy News Japan, I think is the website. And once again, like I already mentioned, I'm really happy with how much active Japanese I managed to study this year. It is way more than I ever would have imagined because of that huge challenge in the middle. And yeah, after all of those stats and information and data, that is all of my language learning for the past year. Hopefully you guys aren't too dataed out by this point. I personally love this kind of stuff. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it as well. Like I said, I'm very, very happy with what I did manage to accomplish this year. I'm very doubtful that I'll manage to do as much next year, but that's totally fine. Definitely by far the highest, most productive language learning year of my life. Let me know what you guys thought. Once again, all these videos are never supposed to be like some bragging contest or competition. This is just what I managed to do this year with my personal situation. Everyone's situation is different. Everyone has different time constraints, different motivations, different ups and downs in those motivations. So everyone's case is of course different, but that's my situation. Like I said, let me know what you guys think, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Until then, annyeong.
Zoe, what are you doing? What is that? Zoe? What is that? Zoe, what are you chewing on? You little. Want to sit here? Or you want to sit with me? All right, come here.
Okay. Good girl.